Welcome into the Door Report. It is episode 121. It is November the 1st, 2021. We've entered the month of November. Temperature's really cooling down there in Nashville, and it's going to be a fun – obviously, it's always a fun month of November. Of course, he's got basketball getting started, baseball. We got VandyBoys in the playoffs right now, so we got a lot to talk about. We are, as always, powered by Alaco Fine Wood Floors, but – Will, it was not a great day for Vanderbilt football Saturday, but it was also not a great Monday for Vanderbilt football with some bad news. So it's kind of trending downwards right now, but hopefully something happens here towards the end of the season to get the spirits up.
You know, Billy, before the Marcus Bradley transfer news, which we'll get into, and before the Caleb Coley decommit news, which we're going to get into, of course, I actually walked away from that Missouri game with a lot more positives. And I don't know the last time that I came on here and was pretty positive feeling after the game, but we'll get into it in our keys and when we run through the play-by-play of that game, mostly focused on that first half, and get into that. This was probably the best coached game by Clark Lee and the staff, just overall beginning to end. I'm not saying it was flawless. I'm not saying there weren't questionable decisions, but overall game plan wise, I think Missouri was just about 9-10 points better than than Vanderbilt player for player. And that's just a hard reality to face.
Yeah, it is at this point in the season. And Missouri is, it's hard to say who's better right now, Missouri or South Carolina. They're so even. Like
I would say undoubtedly Missouri.
Okay.
South Carolina.
I would agree with you there too. Slightly. It goes from in the basement of the SEC, Missouri, South Carolina, then Vandy. And we're kind of splitting hairs. Like Vandy could have beaten South Carolina. I still think they could have beaten Missouri if a few things go their way, but we'll dive into all of it. Of course, we're going to run through Dansby Swanson and Kyle Wright. They helped lead the Braves to a Game 4 victory, and then we'll get to the full Missouri recap. Three main takeaways: Marcus Bradley transfers from Vanderbilt, Caleb Coley decommits also for Vandy, and we're getting a blackout in a couple weeks at the Dud. So that should be fun. We'll talk about those new black uniforms. Before we get to all that, though, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Door_report and Instagram, Door.report. Like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Our podcast is available on Anchor, iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. And while you're at it, give our podcast 5 stars and a review on iTunes. Let's get to the Missouri recap. All right, well, I know we have a lot to get to with Missouri, but I'm not sure how much of this you watched. The Braves Game 4 victory. This was on Saturday, and I know we're just now being able to get to this, but there were VandyBoys handprints all over that game, and it started with a guy by the name of Dylan Lee. He started the game. He was only able to retire one of the 4 batters he faced to begin the game, and who comes in? Mr. Kyle Wright, who they just called up before this World Series. And he was not playing. He didn't play much this year for the Braves in general. He's in the minors. He did the heavy lifting. He only allowed 1 run in 4 2/3 innings of work, plus 3 strikeouts. And keep in mind, Will, he inherited the bases loaded with 1 out and allowed a run on a Carlos Correa ground out. So he did everything he could. He only limited 1 run. I think that was a bomb there from Jose Altuve. And then another Vandy boy stepped in and stepped up in a big spot. Dansby Swanson hit a solo shot in the bottom of the 7th. Jorge Soler, I know you saw, they went back to back. So the Vandy boys handprints, of course, all over this game. And after the game, Swanson and Wright were asked about the 2015 loss to Virginia. And Will, I don't know if you were able to see this, but I want to share the clip because it was really funny, their reaction to it, because they knew it was coming. They knew this question was coming. And immediately after being asked about it, they kind of laughed at each other. So here is the clip, Dansby Swanson and Kyle Wright after the game.
Kyle, you guys were on the 2015 Vanderbilt team together that fell just short College World Series title. What do you guys remember about that run together, and what do you make of the fact that you guys are back here together in the World Series, 1 win away? Go ahead.
Here we go. I mean, it's obviously pretty special. Getting to play with a former college teammate, but we came up short that year, and I feel like it still has a little bit of a sour taste in our mouth. So I know that we want to finish this thing off strong, but it's just to being able to play with Dansby at this moment, this stage is something really cool. And I don't think there's too many guys who've been able to do that. So it's pretty special.
Yeah, I mean, I just think obviously we have such a special bond, the group of guys that played at Vandy or play there now. It's obviously a unique bond, but we kind of have 2 different vantage points too. I was a junior, he was a freshman. He was our closer as a freshman. He's not shy to moments like this. You know, he's been in big time situations ever since I've known him, and that's been one thing that I feel like I've always told Alex. I said that guy, like, he's got it. I've told Cranny, like, he's got it. I know he does. He was nails for us then, and you know, he's obviously been pretty special so far here in this World Series. So he's not shy of the big moments, and you know, that's something that can be gained from that time when we were at school.
How about that, Will? That's something that you look at. You're like, those are two Vandy boys where they were in a spot like that in Omaha, and of course, Dansby's a little bit younger, but that tells you about the family they have. How good of friends they still are. So when you see something like that, it's just kind of reminds you. I mean, there's Vandy boys everywhere. They're everywhere.
It's crazy the handprint that Vanderbilt has on the MLB now. I mean, it is at the level of Alabama, if not greater. I would say at the level, at least, of where Alabama is in the NFL now. And the really telling moment, and this is not necessarily relating to just the Braves game or just the World Series, because I did watch it. I was actually out in Midtown for Halloween and watched the entire game out, and when Dansby hit that home run, the entire place erupted. It was awesome. It was awesome to see. Unfortunately, they didn't close it out last night for us, but there was an MLB commercial. I actually videoed it and posted it on the Door Report there, but it was going through some different MLB original content and different things, and one of the 4 or 5 things that it mentioned was VandyBoys, and it was Jack Leiter just across the screen, and it was the only reference mentioned to college baseball throughout that commercial. And that was just a moment. It was pretty crazy to have a realization of just how big that brand is, and I think sometimes we take it's built in front of our eyes, and when you're so close to it as it's been being built by Tim Corbin and by that entire staff and the players that have been there, you kind of, I don't want to say take it for granted, because at Vanderbilt, you never take success for granted. Right. But I think it's almost just happened so slowly and built up over time that we don't have a real appreciation for what has happened yet. And it's pretty crazy to see guys like Jack Leiter and Dansby stepping up and hitting that bomb in the 7th inning there in the World Series, and just seeing the imprint across professional athletics, and just thinking, man, if we could just do that in football, even 10% of what they've accomplished there in baseball with the impact they've had in the pros, it would be pretty incredible to watch.
That'd be amazing. Hopefully that happens here in the next 10 years, but it speaks for itself, Will. The amount of guys they've sent to the big leagues, that they won 2 World Series titles. I know there's a lot that we say about Brooks Webb and what Corbin have done, but these players and the family they've built is something special. So I wanted to share that just to get it out there. In that commercial, I wasn't aware of the Vanderbilt little 5-second split there in that commercial. I saw him like, holy crap, they're literally everywhere. So it's always fun to see, and we'll continue to cheer on the Braves, because you got Kyle Wright, Dansby, Swanson. They're going to play Tuesday night. That'll be game 6, I'm pretty sure. So you got 6 and 7 coming up in Houston. It's going to be tough. So
because for some reason in the major leagues they still do in the World Series the 2-3-2 format. I don't understand. That doesn't make any sense.
I was texting my friend today. I was like, I wish they did 2-2-1-1-1. Because, obviously, I mean, we're both Braves fans here, so we're talking as
Braves I'm the worst kind of Braves fan. I'm the person that I absolutely hate in every other sport but baseball. Is I maybe watched a combined like 2 or 3 Braves games throughout the entire season, and now I've watched every game leading up to the World Series and the playoffs. I'm the worst. I mean, I hate myself for it, but I'm on the bandwagon, so here we are.
At least we're not doing that for Vandy here.
Oh, no.
You're still in every game, and let's get to the recap. Will Missouri defeats Vanderbilt 37-28. They improved to 4-4 on the season, 1-3 in the SEC. Vandy now 2-7 overall, 0-5 in the SEC. That was their 18th straight SEC loss in front of, would you say, about 19,000 at Vanderbilt? That was the listed attendance.
That's generous
on the
generous.
Website. And looking at it, it didn't look great. And
it looked that 15 or that 19,000 that Vanderbilt posted as their official attendance was about like USC's 55,000 that they said attended their homecoming football game. I mean, I think really stretching it, there were realistically about 12,000, 13,000 people in that stadium.
They just rounded it up. That's
it was a slight roundup.
But let's dive into it, Will. We've got a lot to get to in this game, plus some of the news with Marcus Bradley and Caleb Coley. But I want to run through some of these stats real quick. Start with Mike Wright, 14 of 28, 122 yards, 3 touchdowns, which I don't think we expected him to throw for 3 touchdowns against Missouri, but he did. He did have 1 interception, wasn't super costly. I think it was late in the game. He also had 14 carries, 152 yards. He had a 69-yard run and a 70-yard run. That 70-yarder, Will, was Vandy's longest play from scrimmage this season. So each game they keep getting that play to extend that yardage. Pat Smith also, Will, career high day, 17 carries, 95 yards, first touchdown of his career. That kid is going to keep getting better, and I'm really looking forward to seeing him play down the road. Cam Johnson, 2 touchdowns. Where's that been? Finally, Cam is able to be inserted into the offense the way we expected him to. And that play call from Joey Lynch to move Pat Smith, motion him over to the right, and then bring Cam Johnson over was a beautiful play call. 7 yards per carry for this offense, Will. They took care of the football, and this is a productive day offensively. Now, it wasn't some kind of monster game for them offensively, but 380 yards, that's well above their average of about 300. So that's offensively, but defensively, Will, Orji steps up again, 12 tackles for him. Max Worship had an interception, Worship did, and they have recorded, Will, this is incredible to me. They've recorded at least 1 interception in 6 straight games for the first time since 2013, and that was a pretty damn good defense under Coach Franklin. Now they have 11 interceptions. That's tied for first in the SEC with Alabama and South Carolina. So, when you look at that stat, you're saying this is a good defense, but there's some other holes in the front side of that defense that I think we look at and we go, yeah, that's where they're struggling. And Will, I know you have a few to get to here, but Missouri had 502 total yards. Tyler Beatty was a freak in this game. 39 total touches, 292 total yards, 2 touchdowns. He had 8 yards per carry, I think it was, or 8 yards per pass Missouri had, but he was involved in nearly every play. And he was that dude for them. He was a guy that they could go to and say, hey, we're going to give you the ball and see what you can do. And that's what they did. And Vanderbilt couldn't stop it. So that's essentially what happened. And those are some of the stats I wanted to run to. But, Will, it ultimately came down to, I hate saying this, but in pointing to it, but the killer sequence. They never really responded from that. And it was kind of that gut punch where Vandy never really fully got up. I don't know if you watched the Tyson Fury and who did he fight? He fought, it was about a month ago. The Tyson Fury.
Oh, I know
fight.
Exactly. I know exactly. I watched the fight, and I can't remember the name. Tyson Fury.
Whoever he was fighting, I don't know why we can't get this name right. Whoever he fought, he kept
late at night on Monday, Billy.
Yes,
our brains are not Wilder. Deontay Wilder.
Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury. I know we're comparing what happened to Vandy football game in a boxing match here. But,
I like where you're going here. This is awesome. This sounds like something I would do.
But I'm comparing Vanderbilt to Deontay Wilder. Tyson Fury was firing shots at Wilder, and he kept firing big ones. But he fired one big one, and Wilder could never really recover from it. And it was pretty early there. And we noticed, okay, Fury's going to win this fight, but it's a matter of when. And I think that happened to Vanderbilt. I think that one gut punch before halftime, they never really got up from that. And they never got up. They got up from the mat, but they couldn't fully recover from it. So that's what I got on this, Will, before we get to the 3 takeaways. I know you have some big notes here for you as well.
Yeah, you hit on the defense and creating turnovers, and pretty much they're extremely good at creating turnovers. I mean, we've pointed that out throughout the year, and going into the game, of course, I was there. I didn't watch it on TV, so I don't get it. And I went back and watched through the game like I usually do, and I don't get to see all the little graphics that they post on there. Right. And before the game, they showed one that, and this, of course, was going in. You just said they have 11. Of course, the Maxwell Worship interception there in the red zone that was really big. But going into the Missouri game, they had 10 interceptions, tied for 5th most in the FBS. And all of last season, they had 2, the second fewest in the FBS. So that is one of those things where we have not been as critical of the defense because they seem to be in the right spots, which is this creating turnovers, making the big plays on defense. They just don't have the guys there. And that's why they can create these turnovers because of the scheme, and they have some playmakers and some young playmakers in there, but just overall they don't have the depth to consistently stop an offense that is even remotely efficient with Missouri and having some athletes out there. But I do want to run through at least that first half leading up to that big sequence you're referring to, which everyone will remember when we get to it there. But once again, the Vanderbilt defense came out and started out very bad. And once again, I think it was the 8th straight game they gave up opening drive an opening drive score. And then the offense came out and run, and then just a horrible breakdown in protection for Vanderbilt on that first drive. And then Mike Wright just missed Cam Johnson on that first drive. And once again, Vanderbilt is just 3 and out. And boom, kick back to Missouri, drive down the field. And on Missouri's second drive, they're already up 10-0 in the first quarter. Vanderbilt's once again down 2 scores. And that's really where I think all of us had the moment of here we go again. And then to add insult to injury, Vanderbilt run up middle. And then Mike Wright on 3rd and 10, man, that's just not And of course, if you didn't watch the game, this is going to be tough to follow because I'm trying to get a lot of information out there. But on Vanderbilt's second drive of the game, after Missouri had taken a 10-0 lead, Vanderbilt on their second drive set Mike Wright up on a 3rd and 10, and he got rocked. And this kind of points to another thing, which is the scheme was really good for the most part throughout this game. But there were a lot of situations because of some of the play calls in first and second early that put them in bad spots and got them down early. But then they adjusted. And that's what I want to get to here, is that you could see an adjustment when they realized things weren't working. Now, this still leads to what we always talk about, Billy, which is they can't keep starting out this slow. Yes. And it keeps happening that this staff seems to be pretty good at making in-game adjustments. But at the beginning of the game, they just start out in a hole every game, and this offense is not good enough to do that.
They're having to scratch and claw back every game.
Yep.
And that's a fight that they're just not going to win a ton of times against SEC teams.
Exactly. And then you have the blocked punt there, which I don't know what the hell happened there on that protection from the special teams. And then the Maxwell Worship interception.
I think I missed the blocked punt, which you know we've talked about the punting situation, and I think that's why they can't protect. And when you can't protect your punter, it kind of handcuffs you. And I get what Clark is doing, but you're taking away an entire skill set from your punter. So is it that hard to protect a punter?
Harrison Smith seems to be really struggling. And I don't know, and he didn't struggle as badly before. So I'm not really sure what has changed. I see they're trying to change him into a rugby style, but even when they do that, it doesn't seem to work out extremely well. So the special teams, and that's the sequence that we're going to be getting to, which is what I'm kind of building up to here. So then Maxwell Worship, Missouri makes mistakes, and good pressure on a stunt blitz or a stunt from the defensive line causes a turnover for the Commodores. And here's where things begin to turn. This team bounced back. They could have easily folded in after that blocked punt. And this is why I say I took a lot of positives away from this game, because we saw explosive plays. And I don't need to run through every single play, because if you watch the game or if you watch any highlights, you've seen the Mike Wright plays. And that was just guys being in situations, in one-on-one situations. Joey Lynch did a great job of setting them up in one-on-one situations, and it was guys making plays. Patrick Smith is a freshman. He's going to be a stud. If he can stay healthy, in 2 years, Patrick Smith is a name that you are going to be hearing as far as preseason SEC third team.
Remember the name.
I remember that name. He has real speed, and as a true freshman, he is very shifty and slippery. It makes a lot of guys miss.
Yes,
and that's just an intangible aspect that Vanderbilt doesn't have.
Yeah, they utilized him really well too. You know, and I think against Florida, they tried some certain things, but Florida's defense is just a little bit too fast and athletic. But against a Missouri team, they noticed that they could do some things with Pat Smith, and a lot of those shovel passes. I know they're simple, but to where you get him outside, that set them up. They were finally able to use that play where they faked it, and then they would roll Mike out, or they sent Pat Smith to the right side and they sent Cam Johnson in motion. So, Will, I think what we saw is Joey Lynch was now kind of settling into his role and setting these guys up like we talked about with what Andy Ludwig used to do.
Yeah, and Vandy, of course, we just talked about there. I want to show that there was a lot of adversity in this game.
Yes.
And that's kind of what I'm trying to say is you had the blocked punt, and they recovered, and then they took the lead 14-10, and it was on some incredible big plays from Mike Wright. And here is where I'm going to have kind of a little bit of an opinion in my keys that I'm kind of building up to as well.
Okay.
But 14-10, Vanderbilt actually gets a couple stops on defense and punts back and forth. And towards the end of the half, Vanderbilt is receiving the kickoff at the beginning of the second half. Vanderbilt is driving down the field.
Yes.
With 33 seconds, they get to the Missouri 37. And you're thinking, okay, this is a chance to get points, get up 7, get the ball. This is the type of swing that Vanderbilt needs to capitalize on. Well, that drive stalled out. I don't think it was any fault of play calling, just it stalled out at that point in the game. And I kid you not, Billy, I don't know what it looked like on TV, but I just want to get this out there on this decision from Clark Lee at the end of the half to fake the field goal, and then we can get into the keys.
Okay.
At that point in the game, I saw a lot of gripes. You have to be okay with the call whether it works or not. So there are a lot of people on Twitter that like to play Monday morning armchair quarterback and say, okay, that fake punt, how can you make that decision right there? What are you
lost
thinking?
Us the game.
But it's the same people that if he does it and it works, they're like, gutsy call by Clark Lee there. That's the things so you have to have the opinion going in whether you like the decision or not. Exactly.
Yeah.
And in that spot, it was a 52-yard field goal. And it didn't really, this is the weird part when I watched it on TV that I realized. It was raining the entire game. It was a misty rain. but it was raining, and it didn't show up on TV of what the weather was like. And it was bad. It was not good conditions. In my opinion, best case of 40% chance that Bulovas hits that 52-yard field goal. I mean, he hasn't been kicking well, just being completely honest. And he was short on a 49-yarder already in better conditions earlier this year. And a gust of wind, I kid you not, blew in directly into my face. I sit in the section of the horseshoe facing where he would have been kicking, blowing directly in his face, dropping that down to, I think, 10% that he would have maybe made it.
Yeah.
And that was going on right when that timeout happened before the kick. So I don't necessarily agree with the call of having Bulovas run it on the outside there. I would have liked to see some type of pass or somebody leak out, but the call to go for it, I don't disagree with, because the risk-reward ratio was right.
Yeah.
Missouri should not have been able to score in the way they did. They had 15 seconds and one timeout. There's no way that should have been a possibility.
Yeah.
So, Clark, that was the right decision in that situation, because if you go back and watch the replay of that fake field goal, there was one block on the outside that if it would have just been executed, there was a real chance that play worked.
He had the edge.
If the one crackback block towards the middle can seal the edge, he would have gotten that first down, and we'd be talking about this from a very different perspective. But that Hail Mary, Billy, I mean, my God, and I know you want to get to that in your keys.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But, Will, I honestly wanted to say, if he would have kept going, if Bulovas wouldn't have tried to juke, he might have had it. But I realized he's a punter, and he's a big guy. He's not unathletic.
You know, I don't know if he's not an unathletic guy at all. And I'm sure he's not. He would dust most college students in a 40-yard dash. He's still not ever going to get the edge.
No, he's not. And we love you, Joe. You're still big like Joe, but he had the edge at the beginning. At the outset of the play, we're like, oh my gosh, is this going to happen? No, it's not going to happen.
It looked well set up because of the missed block. So it all comes down to that. It's just the play was designed well. If it's executed correctly by the players in the field, it works. And therefore, good call. You just have to live with the consequences of the aggressive call.
That play is a microcosm of the season somewhat.
What did we say, Billy? I think we said that we would never come on here and complain about a Vanderbilt coach being too aggressive. So I'm not going to go back on that, because where we get sick is just losing the game by default.
And I respect
if you lose the game based on decisions. Yes.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times you're the guy that, may look at that play and say, oh, what are we doing? But I respect you for saying, no, I like the call. I don't mind that call. You tweeted that right after. And I didn't mind the call either.
I think I was one of the very few people that was willing to go out and take that take that I actually did, because people were saying, what is the benefit of that call? And I was like, you'd be in the same situation if he missed the field goal. The benefit was to gain yardage to kick another field goal.
Right.
Because there's a huge difference in rainy, wet, windy conditions of a 40-yarder versus a 52-yarder. Yeah. And that, I can see the logical steps in game Clark Lee took to get there. And if you can't see the logical steps he took to get there, then you haven't watched enough football.
Yeah. And Will, I also look at, if they would have punted that football, people would have been bashing.
Oh, it would have rioted. You're 2-6, guys. We're not playing for a bowl game. Play to win.
Exactly.
If you lose on your decisions, lose on your players trying to make plays. Don't lose by default of dropping back 8 and rushing 3. Exactly. That's where I have issues. I don't have issues faking a field goal on an aggressive, smart call at the 35-yard line on a 2-6 team that the season's lost. Let's try to get a damn SEC win. So I see where Clark Lee's trying to go.
Yeah, we see where he's going with it, and it was definitely a huge sequence, and I'll get to it here. That's my first key, as I want to dive a little bit deeper into it. I know you just kind of went through it, Will, but the fake 52-yard field goal with also, I like the old Les Miles toss, where you saw the Les Miles little toss back like he liked to do. Didn't quite work like Coach Lee planned. After the game, he said that they liked a look they saw in Missouri's defense. And, we touched on that a little bit. They thought they had a shot at the fake. Obviously, I didn't mind the call. What happened shortly after, though, is what just derailed the entire game. First, a 10-yard completion to the tight end, Barrett Bannister, again, the tight end, for a first down. 6-yard pass to Tyler Beatty to the 45-yard line. So they're at the 45. They're not going to, this was second or third down, right? This wasn't a fourth down Hail Mary. This was I'm pretty sure
last
this was
play of the half.
Yeah, this was the last play of the half on a second down play call. And Kiki Chisholm gets past, I think it was Jerkins. And I tweeted this out from our account, Will. How was he able to get by anyone? For the life of me, you have, I don't know how many guys were back there, 6-7 Vandy guys that played prevent defense. It didn't even really look like a total prevent defense, though. It's almost like they didn't expect the Hail Mary. But again, I'm not going to I hate putting one single blame on anybody for that play call. It was, maybe the coaches didn't have them deep enough. And the players, bottom line, though, will the players have to go out there and make a play on that? There's 7 guys back there. If you're blaming that on something the coach did, you're out of your mind.
You don't need to, yeah, exactly. You don't need to tell players to not allow a Hail Mary deep on the last play of the half. That should be an understood thing at the college level, SEC, Division I college football level. Should be understood by the players.
If you played football at any level, you know what to do there. Just a brutal way to end the half. And Will, I know you felt this way too. It felt like that was the momentum they needed. Missouri needed to grab control of the game, and they never looked back. And Vandy also never really recovered from that. And these are the type of sequences, Will, we talked about. And I'm not saying they've had a sequence like this in every game, but this is becoming a trend. And, I'm sure we could point to a sequence every game, but it's becoming a trend where these sequences are becoming more and more obvious. We saw it huge against Mississippi State. Now, they were down big against Mississippi State, but still that changed the course of that game. It changed this course of this Missouri game, and that Missouri team is beatable. Vanderbilt can beat that team. I think if you go back out of 10 times, I think Vandy gets them 4, maybe 5. I mean, who knows? But I think Vandy can beat them 3 or 4 times out of 10. I really do. I think Vanderbilt can beat that team, but they just shot themselves in the foot. Especially, I mean, the Hail Mary call, that the play call. Obviously, you don't doubt that they're running a Hail Mary. That's not what we're talking about. But the way Vanderbilt defended that was very mind-boggling. And you can't even point to an excuse saying this team's young. I think this is go up there and make a play. And give credit to Kiki Chisholm, though. He went up and made a hell of a play, but that's ultimately on Vandy. You've got 6 guys back there on 1, and you've seen those before, but I think you looked at that and said, okay, that was a guy making a play, and credit to him. But the bottom line is you got to find a way to bat that ball down. And that's my first key, Will, because that killed the game, killed the momentum for Vanderbilt. And it gave Missouri that life, that sense of life right before the half. And you've seen that carry over. You've seen Vanderbilt have life and then carry to the second half. Now it was roles reversed. Missouri took that life and they played with it. So first main takeaway, that killer first sequence, Will, right before the half.
Yeah, I mean, that's the key of the entire game there. But my key one is going to be related to that, but I really do think this game was a step forward for the staff, and I think it was a step forward for Clark Lee. I know that doesn't sound – this sounds almost head in the clouds when you lose to probably the number 12 team in the SEC, and they give up, 500 total yards to that team. But you look at it, and this staff designed a game plan that allowed Vanderbilt to, on their own merit of those players on the field – I'm not saying it was a perfect game plan. I'm not saying every decision they made and every play call was perfect – but they gave these players an opportunity to make plays, and the players at times did make the plays, and you saw that. And I'm going to hit on that in my key 2. But then you saw on the fake field goal, a guy misses a block, play doesn't work. On that Hail Mary at the end of the half, Clark Lee trusted his guys to stop that play. And that's just on coaches. That is Missouri's receiver making a play and just being the better player on that field at that moment. Vanderbilt just doesn't make those plays right now. It's why I keep saying and keep hitting on, it's not all on the staff. It's not all on the players. It's a mesh. And each game you've seen, like the South Carolina game, I really do believe if they played that South Carolina team 100 times, Vanderbilt would win 50 and South Carolina would win around 50. I think if they played this Missouri team 100 times, I think Vandy would win around 25 or 30 of them. But Missouri on average is probably about 10 points better than Vanderbilt. It's weird when you go back and watch on TV. You do get kind of a weird perspective when you're in person because you can really see the speed differential in person and the size differential. And this Missouri team, player for player, was definitely better than South Carolina. And they were definitely more athletic and larger than Vanderbilt across the line. Their skill positions against our corners and defense were better. They probably had a more consistent presence at quarterback and a more consistent offense. This Missouri team was just better. And if this team had looked like this and the staff had a game plan that kind of fit the opponent throughout the entire season, especially on the offensive side of the ball, I don't think we'd be sitting here even if we had the same exact 2-7 record. If every single game you looked at it and said, man, the players just didn't make plays, but this coaching staff did put them in situations to succeed, and they did utilize the playmakers that they do have on the field in Mike Wright, Cam Johnson, Chris Pierce, Patrick Smith. So my complaints are much, much less after a game like this, that you really did lose on kind of your own aggression as opposed to you lost because you were too conservative.
Right. And we talk about teams, did Missouri win this game or did Vanderbilt lose this game? Missouri won this game. Like, it's always, people think that's a dumb question sometimes, but there were some games this season that I think, like, Vanderbilt lost the South Carolina game. Gamecocks didn't win that game. Some people hate hearing that, but I really do think it's going to be interesting to see how this trajectory goes with South Carolina, Missouri, and Vanderbilt down the road, because I think we've learned this season, where these programs are. Vanderbilt, Missouri, and South Carolina are all in the same boat. They really are. And you can say Missouri maybe a step ahead, but all three of those teams could fight for the life. And I think it'd be a mix and match of wins, who loses, mistakes everywhere, and new coaches. And so it's going to be interesting to see if Clark Lee can take that step, maybe beat South Carolina next year, maybe beat Missouri next year. If he can do that, I think, you're seeing small steps like we've talked about. So I'm going to go with my number 2, Will, the offense. And this is my only positive here in the takeaways, but I touched on it at the beginning. This was a positive, and it's pretty obvious to see. 380 total yards of offense. I talked about it earlier, above their 301 yard average, which honestly isn't an awful average. Most teams in this day and age of football are averaging close to 400 yards of offense, and maybe a little bit higher.
Billy, it's awful.
It's not. It's not good. But I'm saying, for Vanderbilt standards and where this program is at right now, it could be a lot worse. So 258 yards on the ground, 122 yards through the air. The passing, it's non-existent. Like, the passing attack, which we came into the season saying, okay, they can have some success with Will Sheppard, Chris Pierce, and all, a lot of those weapons coming back. But, well, you look at it, and, Mike Wright he's a running quarterback. And I think today, against Missouri, we learned that with Mike Wright in the game, you have, Clark Lee talked about it before at the very beginning of the season. Mike Wright gives you a chance to compete in the game, but he also said Ken Seals gives us a shot to win games. And to an extent, I'm with him on that. I still think Mike Wright, like, he will put them in shootouts, but is Mike Wright going to make that throw, step up in the pocket, and throw a dime intermediate pass to Cam Johnson? Who knows? We haven't seen a ton of that. He did throw 3 touchdowns, but they were all in the red zone there. So I just think with this offense, Will, we saw what they can be with Mike Wright. We saw what they can be with Patrick Smith putting in some work. Cam Johnson. I mean, we learned that if you involve Cam Johnson, you're going to have success. Like, that play call, I still point to that play call from Joey Lynch. It was beautiful. Chris Pierce had a little bit better day, but Will Sheppard has kind of gone extinct for a little bit here in the past 2 games. So I just think, Will, as tough as it is to say right now, I think they're beginning to find what they can do. And I said in this takeaway, they began to click. I may not even want to say that, but I think they're starting to figure out, okay, this works for us. And now it's Missouri. We get that. But I still think, like, that play call in the red zone, as you're setting up setting up runs with Pat Smith to the right side, you send him to the right, you fake it to him, then you give it to Cam Johnson. Like, I think that would work over a decent chunk of SEC teams. I just think it's that good of a play call, because you set your offense up. And Joey Lynch finally showed us that this offense can work in this style and what we're trying to do. And a lot of it was hidden behind what Mike Wright did running the ball. I mean, he had a hell of a day running the football. But again, you're playing against a really bad Missouri defense. So whenever we look at these games, I do think we tend to point to the successes they've had, but they're playing South Carolina, Missouri. But I don't care who you're playing in the SEC. When you see success like that, I think it's you can point to it. So number 2 for me, Will, is the offense began to figure out what they can do and how they can have success. So I'll narrow it down to that.
Yeah, my number 2 key kind of goes alongside that, but I'll just say what I have written down, which Mike Wright might be the guy. And I'm going to preface this with a lot of kind of small caveats to this. So I want to say, Ken Seals' pure pocket quarterback and arm talent is undoubtedly the most talented quarterback on the roster, and is more talented than Mike Wright with arm talent, pocket quarterback presence. I think that Mike Wright would agree with that. It's not hating on the guy. That's not necessarily his skill set. Just like, undoubtedly, Mike Wright is a way better runner than Ken Seals. I don't think Ken Seals would argue that. So
these are facts.
With this team in particular, and this offensive line and where they have been, you can say this was by far the best offensive performance of the year. I don't care what the box score is. It wasn't even close. This was the best offensive performance of the year. Not even close. I'll repeat it again. And we keep discussing this decision of Mike Wright versus Ken Seals, and if Ken Seals was able to come back, who would you put there? And for the first time in my life, I wouldn't mind seeing a 2 quarterback system. I don't know if they will do it, but just with in particular, I think this team would benefit from that because of how much the O-line struggles, and I think it would really, really set back a defense being able to pin their ears back and feast against the Vanderbilt team that struggles to run the ball initially. But where I want to go with this is we kept saying throughout the entire season that Vanderbilt is lacking playmakers and big play guys that can get you that 70-yard chunk play, get you down in scoring position, and has the speed to create that play, not just make a 15-yard play, but then make the guy miss and turn on the jets and beat the safety and corner and be a 60, 70-yard play. Normally, that's not your quarterback. I don't think that Vanderbilt fans want it to be the quarterback on a long-term basis. But on this team, Mike Wright is the best playmaker on this entire roster, bar none, not close. He is the most explosive player on this roster, period. Therefore, he has to be on the field. And if that puts Ken Seals in the backup role by default, then so be it. But Mike Wright has to be on the field 75% of snaps. He just does. Because that offense and the swagger that they play with, and it fed over to the defense in that game without that Hail Mary at the end of the half, which was just piss poor execution by the players on the field. I know Clark Lee told them to get back and prevent. I know he did not tell them to allow that receiver to run free, and that play was coming directly at me, and he ran completely free open. There's no defense in the world that was designed to do that with 4 seconds left in the half. Mike Wright sets them up for an actual brand of football that is relatively enjoyable to watch. Now, he does miss some throws that Ken Seals would hit. He doesn't have the arm. He doesn't have the consistency. It turns into a little bit of a chaotic situation, but that little juke move he made on the inside before he turned on the jets on that first 70-yard run and looked into that camera was the first time that it was fun to be in Vanderbilt Stadium, maybe the entire season. And I say that with complete honesty. I mean, it was fun you felt like they had potential every time they ran a read option RPO play. It had potential to bust. And it makes you just sit there and think, if they had been working on this the entire offseason, really focused on RPOs, read options, these kind of like more efficient. It's not the Ole Miss offense, but it's basically some things that they did with Plumlee before when he was at quarterback there. It's a lot of motion. It's a lot of jet sweeps. It's a lot of shovel passes. It's a lot of quick stuff. And that is something Vanderbilt can do because it allows the offensive line not to have to sit there and pass in 5 or 7 drop step protection and go through 1, 2, 3, 4 reads. That's just brutal on this offensive line against any SEC offensive lines, but especially this year. Any Vanderbilt offensive line is going to struggle to do that, which has always been my gripe with Vanderbilt, is they keep trying to run offenses that Alabama and Georgia run. And Vanderbilt needs to run offenses that Vanderbilt can run. Yeah. And I think with Mike Wright, they can build that. Because he doesn't necessarily have an NFL arm, but he can throw the football. To me, he reminds me of a faster Chris Nixon with a better arm. And that's no slight to Chris Nixon. He's fun to watch, but I really do think Mike Wright, if he has an offense specifically built around him, that he can be successful. And I think that gives a path to the future. I'm not saying any of this is going to happen, but a lot of these mobile quarterbacks are guys Vanderbilt can get. Vanderbilt can't get the 5-star Trevor Lawrence. Vanderbilt just can't get those guys, and they're never going to get them consistently. Who they can get is a guy like Mike Wright with track speed, who has a pretty damn good arm for a guy with track speed, who's kind of fallen under the radar because he's a little bit skinny, and other more relatively prestigious Power 5 programs aren't really looking for that. So Vanderbilt can get that consistently, and you can get the guys on the outside that can execute that. They can consistently get good enough offensive lines. I just see that as a path forward way more than recruiting this traditional offense and traditional pocket quarterback.
And he's fun to watch, Will. It's a fun brand of football when he's on the field. And we talked about
Vanderbilt football fun again.
Yes, and we're all for that. And Mike Wright makes it fun. And like that celebration, that little wink into the camera, like, and his celebrations, like, you got to love the guy. And he shows heart. He's a leader. And I love watching him. He's kind of, he's one of those guys that you can't take your eyes off the TV. A lot of times I was watching the game. I went to the bathroom and I come back in and Vandy scored a touchdown. And I'm like, I missed the whole Mike Wright play. I missed the possession, but he's the guy where you tune in and he's still a sophomore. He's still a young kid, but down the road, Will, he could be the guy.
He could turn into must-watch TV if he continues to develop. And I think he's won over all Vanderbilt fans by You did not see him pout for 1 second when he was not out on that field behind
Nope.
Ken Seals for 1 second.
He's a team guy. He loves playing the game of football, and I love watching him. And he plays backyard football, and a lot of people like that. So I think that will work for Vandy down the road. Will, number 3 for me, this team is still learning how to win. And Bruno Reagan talked about this a couple episodes ago. He said this team, point blank, doesn't know how to win. And the coaching staff, I think you could say that about them too. They're still trying to, obviously they've won 2 games. They won on the road and they won at home against UConn. But, that was more of what you're seeing with the opponents. And to be honest, yes, it's a good win against Colorado State. But we talked about this, a few episodes ago after that game. Colorado State really shot themselves in the foot. So I don't know if this team knows how to beat an opponent that they feel like they're even with, or maybe is even better than them. And that's going to be the challenge. Well, they've been outscored 110-20 in the first quarter this season, which is mind boggling. They've allowed points on the opponent. You talked about this on the opponent's opening drive, 8 straight games. And the way Vandy has started games, Will, they've just killed them all season long. When you put yourself behind the 8 ball, the way they do in these games, you almost put yourself out of the game in the first quarter. And they've had to scratch and claw their way back in nearly every game. And, you've seen it. I don't think they've had a first quarter lead. It may have been against ETSU. Stanford. Yep. Stanford and ETSU, I think, are the only 2 games they had a first quarter lead. And if there's a stat nerd out there listening that can prove me wrong, go ahead. But Will, with this offense and the way this team is designed with the complement, like if they play complementary football, I think they could have beaten South Carolina. I think they can beat Missouri. Now down the road, can they beat Kentucky? Probably not. Can they beat Tennessee? Probably not. Ole Miss, definitely not. But I think you can see if they play complementary football, I think they can compete with Kentucky. I think they can compete with Tennessee. Now Ole Miss is a different story. But what I'm trying to say, Will, is they don't know how to, like, that first quarter matters. And I think the staff knows that. And I know we talk about the excuse with the scout team guys, and I don't know how legitimate that is, but that shouldn't be an excuse for a team, especially that's still growing as a staff, as a team. I think right now, point blank saying this team doesn't know how to win. And that first quarter is so important. Every team knows that. Every coaching staff knows that. Clark Lee knows that. And, I'm sure they're doing everything they can to actually play a whole lot better in that first quarter even, really. But I think if they could get a start like some of these other teams have had on them, they would be in so much a better spot. They would have been a better start against Missouri, better spot against Mississippi State every game. So I think bottom line, Will, I'm not saying I have the solution for this team. I don't think anyone does right now. But once this team is able to rally around a certain play or a certain player, I think you've seen that a little bit with Mike Wright. But once they're able to grab hold of that and put it into a bottle and say, here's our recipe to win games. Here's what do they call it in Space Jam? The special stuff. If they can, whenever they find that, I mean, they're going to be able to win games but they're a long way down. So Will, my third takeaway, and I think we've known this for a while, but this team's still learning how to win, and it's going to take a while. And I think win against SEC teams, I guess, to rephrase that. So this team's still learning how to win, and we've known that for a while, but this one really opened my eyes to see, okay, this is a winnable game, but there's a few mistakes that you point to. You say, okay, that's why they just were not able to win this game. So, and you saw Missouri, they had one dude, Tyler Beatty. You could argue he won them that game. Without Beatty, where are they? That would have been a lot closer game. Hell, maybe Vandy would have won it. So, last takeaway for me, Will, is this team still learning how to win, point blank.
Damn, Billy, I kind of do. I like that we don't read each other's keys, because it adds a little bit more
naturality.
Genuine, naturality. That's a great word there. That's a $1 million word. That's why you're the man here. But so my third key is growing pains from players and staff are continuing. You're seeing it. I do think there is growth on both sides. I try not to get too up and down week to week, because undoubtedly this season is a disappointment from Clark Lee. His year one, regardless, unless they rip off 3 straight wins, which you just ran through the teams they have, I don't see that happening.
Yep.
Then this season one is a disappointment. And it plain and simple, this is not what was expected. But they're growing pains. And at least you're seeing a couple games here with South Carolina and Missouri that are like, okay, if this team plays exactly how they just did against South Carolina and Missouri, do they lose to ETSU? I think absolutely not. Are some of their games earlier in the season closer? I think absolutely. And this kind of hits on what actually my second key was leading into, which is this staff has some huge decisions to make on a 2-7 football team in these last 3 games. And it hits on exactly what I was saying. This team seems to be developing an identity as far as this RPO and read option offense, options on the outside, a traditional shovel option, this kind of jet sweep action. They seem to be developing this identity, and it's working. This Vanderbilt team, the offense has been abysmal. They put up 380 yards against Missouri, but this team is ranked 122nd out of 130 in the entire FBS in total yardage per game, and pretty much in the bottom 10 in every single stat that you can find, outside of, I'm pretty sure, rushing yards now that Mike Wright is quarterback. So keep in mind, this offense, the problem is you have these 2 quarterbacks that were competing for the starting job, and they're so different, and their styles are so different. And the entire offense has to be different depending on who you go with. So if you see more of this RPO action and more of this kind of quick shovel option kind of misdirection game implemented throughout the last 3 games, and it works against some pretty good competition these last 3 weeks, I think you're going to see some real rumblings that maybe Joey Lynch just needed this style of quarterback, and this is kind of what he wants to work with, since it's kind of weird to think about where they handed over those play calling duties, Billy. How much of this offense is actually Joey Lynch's when it was handed off to him? How much of it is him calling somebody else's playbook and David Ryder? How much is that the case?
Do we even know who's actually calling plays? Because
it's Joey Lynch.
But we didn't even get clear. Like, I know Clark Lee said he's calling plays now, but with all the issues with that offense, could this be a by committee type of thing? I know that's very rare, but I just wonder who's calling play. I know Joey Lynch is our guy, and we've been talking about him, but with this staff, I really think
it's obviously we're speculating here. But if I had to guess, I would say, based on when they changed over, this has to be David Wright's playbook for the most part, outside of things they've implemented with Mike Wright and the RPO, different things you wouldn't have had with Ken Seals. It can't be Joey Lynch's playbook from the beginning of the year. So you would think it's kind of a cooperative effort, but probably Joey Lynch has the final call, I would say, is what that means. He's the one calling down the actual play and calling it in.
That's what I would assume, but there's something fishy. Man, I don't know what it
makes you watch this game and say, was this the same guy that's been calling plays all year? Because they mixed it up and they did some aggressive things on the outside. Not all of it worked. Yeah. Not all of it worked, but the things like the shovel pass to Schoenwald in the red zone. This team has struggled all year. Things like that, the little shovel pitch on the jet sweep to Cam Johnson. We haven't seen anything like that all year. And it's weird to see that as Mike Wright continues to develop into this offense, you're seeing more plays that utilize his skill set. And it makes you think, man, is this the move? Is this how this team moves forward?
Yeah.
And that's just so, because I think we were both so high on Ken Seals going in, and I'm still high on him because I think he has a hell of an arm and I think he has potential, but just facts are facts. And this offense was awful when he was playing quarterback, and it's better under Mike Wright, just statistically.
And
that's not hating on anyone, because I do think he's a talented kid.
Right. It makes me think, how much of an imprint does Clark Lee now have on this offense, and how has it evolved? Like, is there another offensive
That's a good
coach?
Word, Billy. Evolve. You're seeing it evolve and improve.
Yeah. And is there another offensive coach on the staff that's also bringing input? Who knows? Maybe we get some clarification here, but Will, that was a good group of key takeaways. And again, I like what you said about the growing pains. I mean, I think that could define the season. Like, you look at it, you look back at it, and it's like, okay, it was really bad. It's like a little kid, when he's, 1 year old, they're growing, their teeth are coming in and they're crying, but that's what's happened to this team. It's painful, but are they getting older? Yes, they're getting older. They're, they're, as hard as it is to say, this team has gotten better. It's very hard to say.
I'm trying not to get too high or too low. I'm just trying to carry over some things. So, man, I'm getting a little here. Back to the middle.
Back to the middle.
This game gave me, before we get into some more negative stuff here, this game gave me, for the first time, the entire season. When I say the entire season,
clarity.
I mean, even after the wins against Colorado State and after the wins against UConn, this is the first time that I saw anything from this offense that said this is a building block to move forward on.
You saw
and you really don't want that to come in week 9 or in game 8 of the year. That's not the ideal. Or what game?
Maybe a little bit.
Game
earlier.
9 of the year. It would have been nice to maybe see that week 2, week 3, but you're learning. It's a young team. It's their first time playing a full SEC season, so This
see.
at least gives you a tiny bit of positivity,
Yes.
and I'm sure it'll be crushed very soon on this next 3-game stretch. So don't
And then-
worry, Commodore fans. It won't be too positive after
Stay in the middle. Stay in the middle.
Yeah,
We're trying to stay in the
exactly.
middle here. That's the theme of this podcast. But Will, as we try to stay in the middle, let's go pretty deep into a rabbit hole of awful day of Vanderbilt football. I feel really bad for Commodore fans everywhere because Monday
Awful day
we're
of
recording
football for anyone that's a fan of the Middle Tennessee area.
Yes,
Just
Titans,
horrendous,
awful.
horrendous.
The Titans can't have nice things either. Vanderbilt obviously can't. But Will, what I'm getting to is Marcus Bradley entering the transfer portal, and him entering the portal did not surprise me, especially after Coach Lee said he didn't have the behavior or habits to be an active part of the program. And when you hear something like that, it's kind of like, this couldn't end well. So him transferring didn't surprise me. But Will, what I'm looking at here is a potential danger of he was a Mason recruit. So that points to me thinking, it'll be interesting to see how many more players decide to enter the transfer portal, considering all of them were recruited by Derek Mason, which is also another just almost impossibility for Clark Lee to bring these guys and change their mindsets from what Coach Mason was telling them. The fact they retained that whole class was a miracle. So the weeding out process, Will, of everything Coach Mason did to damage this program, it's going to continue. It'll continue for the next year or so until Clark Lee has all of his guys in there. He's doing what's best for the program. And with every decision he makes, I know he's made a lot of mistakes, but just like every human being, well, we all make mistakes. He'll tell you that himself also. Like, there's been some mistakes here from everyone. But he's preached from the beginning, this is a 10-year plan of creating a football program that Vandy fans can be proud of. And I know it has not looked great this season. But Marcus Bradley transferring, things like that are going to happen, and they must happen in order to change the culture. Think back to our conversations, Will, with Whit Taylor and Norman Jordan and Jim Arnold. I know this was back in the early 80s, but I do think there's some parallels with they were rock bottom in the SEC in 1980. They got a little bit better in 81. 82, they had that historic team. I'm not pointing that this is what's going to happen with Vanderbilt football this year, but that's how you change a culture. I mean, guys are going to leave, guys are going to stay. They're going to like what you do. And, you have a guy leave. So Marcus Bradley wasn't surprising. Obviously he's a talented guy. And hopefully he finds a spot on a different team somewhere. But I think the thing that was disconcerting, Will, was Caleb Coley decommitting. And he was one of the prize. He was the best cornerback recruit in the class, one of the best in the class. And that's something you see, okay, hopefully this isn't a snowball effect of these guys realizing what's happening this season, maybe finding some things out and end up decommitting. So that one concerns me. The Caleb Coley decommitment concerns me. Marcus Bradley, not so much. I mean, obviously it hurts. He's a talented kid, but he wasn't really playing. And you've seen guys play over him like Nate Clifton and Tank Sujic. So Marcus Bradley, DEFCON meter maybe at 2. Caleb Coley, DEFCON meter at like 6 or 7, because he was one of the better guys in that class. And you just, as a Vandy fan, you really hope that doesn't continue to happen.
Yeah, I mean, with the new transfer rule since the NCAA implemented it, I mean, every year it's up and increased, and this year is going to be even more so than years in the past because there's more guys with that extra year of eligibility due to the season last year. So this is not panic time. I was excited about Marcus Bradley. He was one of the highest recruits ever brought into this program. Clark was able to retain him. Things didn't work out, and you're going to have guys decommit and you're going to have guys transfer out, especially when they were recruited by a previous staff and the current staff has come in. And just to be honest, there's been no success had by the current staff. You're going to have guys that are not bought in because they weren't recruited to this program. They were recruited to Derek Mason's Vanderbilt program. And there's a stat that Robbie Weinstein put out on 247sports.com where he said there were 2,646 FBS players to enter the transfer portal during the 2020-2021 transfer cycle per a source. That's up from 1,692 in 2019-20 and 1,717 in 2018-19. Wow. So that is an insane stat. And if that is correct, and I'm reading this correctly,
it came from
there were 2,646 FBS players to enter the transfer portal. There are 130 FBS football teams. That's over on average 20 per team that entered the transfer portal. Wow. So everyone take a step back.
Relax.
This is not the NCAA football of, and I'm the last guy to make excuses for this staff. I've been as brutal as anybody that says anything about Vanderbilt on this staff and what they've done decision-wise.
Stay in the middle.
But you're going to have 10 to 20 guys transfer every year now. And that's every program across the country. Alabama's going to have it. To Vanderbilt and Kansas are going to have it. It's just, if key guys like what happened at the end of the Mason era, like Donovan Kaufman and Dimitri Moore, and guys that are on the field, play Tay Daly, guys that are playing, contributing, and then they decide to transfer, that's when you have a sign of things to come that are bad.
Yeah.
A guy like Marcus Bradley, he's young. He'll have eligibility immediately. He can go find a better fit somewhere. It just didn't work out, and he wasn't bought in all the way. That is fine. There's no hard feelings. He parts early. He can go have a very successful career somewhere else. Now, if you see other guys like Tank Sujic, who seems to be working into the rotation a little more, transfer as well, and you start seeing some more of this young talent that we're excited about transferring out, then you start to ring the alarm bells and think, okay, there's something really deep going on here. But just to start off, you're going to have 10, 20% of your team gone regardless. And hopefully you can get the right 10 to 20% out. And it's guys that just aren't bought in. It's that split we were talking about in the locker room that is going to happen on any team that is struggling, especially when you're struggling this bad at Vanderbilt and you didn't expect the offensive side of the ball to struggle this badly. You're going to have guys leave. And it's just, if you see the wave start happening, which you saw at the end of the Mason era, then it's time to say, okay, Clark has lost control a little bit of this program. But right now, I'm not ringing any alarm bells.
No, and even with Caleb Coley, I think we can start to really worry if that results in guys like BJ Diakite and maybe some other guys, because there have been rumblings about him as well. I've heard Caleb Coley's going to commit to Michigan State, by the way, too. So, I mean, can you blame the guy? I mean, it's tough. Recruiting's a tough world, and it's a relationship business. And guys, they form relationships with coaches, and
it's not just recruiting. It's not just recruiting anymore. It's the crazy part of what the NCAA has turned into, which I said it was going to turn into, which I'm fine with. I just want to point it out before I go on this. Is I'm fine with it happening because coaches can leave whenever they want, so players should have that same flexibility of a one-time transfer. So I'm fine with it. I don't care. But you knew what was going to happen. And I read a bunch of articles saying no way that perpetual free agency is going to happen in college football. And I said, you're an idiot if you think that coaches aren't going to be backdoor communicating with these other guys. It's not even coaches. It's just players talking to players. All these guys go to the same Nike camps. All of them go to the same Star camps. All of them played against each other in high school and at these prep academies. And they know each other and they text. And guys are just going to move around because there's no consequence to moving around, which I'm fine with.
Yeah.
But you're simultaneously recruiting your team to stay while recruiting in the new talent. And that's an even tougher aspect of college coaching that hasn't been there before.
If you remember too, Will, when Derek Mason left Vandy, we talked about him poaching away Donovan Kaufman. Like, he can do that. It's not illegal. Like, there's so many that's happening around the entire country. So I think, that was kind of an overreach. I don't think we did that. There's some Vandy fans out there.
It is illegal.
But let's face it, there's illegal things happening in college football every
it's
year.
An illegal recruiting tactic, but I don't have a moral opposition to it.
I mean,
Donovan Kaufman came to Vanderbilt to play under Derek Mason. He didn't come to Vanderbilt to play under Coley.
Let's not act like there's morality being practiced in these SEC coaching staffs. I mean, come on. Have you met?
Don't you know? It's the cleanest conference in the country.
It just means more, man. That's all it is.
It just means more.
Well, we got one more thing to get to, the blackout against Kentucky.
Oh, and Billy, it just means more, by the way. I still haven't read anything. I just want to get this in right before
here we go.
Tennessee had this entire recruiting scandal that was like a big deal, and it's just gone because they fired the coach. So now we know all you have to do is fire your coach and fire the staff, and there's no consequences to breaking the rules. So, Vandy, keep an eye out for that.
I don't know if that's a threat or what that is, but we'll see where that goes. But I mean, nobody's talking about the McDonald's badge.
I don't know why I don't know why teams don't just cheat. I legitimately the NCAA. I'm serious. I'm serious
like they're
now.
cheating.
Even more so.
Cheating's going around every.
No, it is now legitimately in college football. Like, we have this guise now of this NIL. You really think all these NIL deals are legit, man? Like, are you reading any of these? Do you think that this company is coming in and being like, this is going to be a really good return on my investment? Like, all of it is so stupid. Why don't we just say that these guys are getting paid to come play at these places? I don't know. That's a different rant for a different day. Yeah, I am. I'm telling you, it can't get worse.
I love it. All right, well, let's get to one more thing. Hot takes.
Hey, this is a late night episode, Billy. You got to keep in mind we're not recording at noon. We're recording at like 9:30 p.m. my time, 10:30.
We're both brain dead here.
Different hot takes.
Very different. Well, luckily we got one more thing to touch on. Kentucky in 2 weeks. Get ready. It's the blackout at the Dud. I think, Will, this is smart. I think because I'm not saying this is going to flock 10,000 more Vandy fans at the game, but if you have a blackout uniform combo, I think that puts you in that echelon of not, Alabama or Clemson, but okay, you do something different with your program. And I think kids like that. They like you having fun with what you do. And I love the black uniforms. They got the Vandy cursive script on the front. The star V is back on the helmet. And Will, the only gripe I have with these uniforms, though, does the gold look a little mustardy? Does it look a little bit like, if you look at that picture, maybe it's just a picture in the glare or something.
Yeah, I love to see it.
But it looks a little, just a hair off. So hopefully I don't know what that is, but yeah, I love them. I didn't know if he would go with the All Blacks, Coach Lee would, but I think he understands that this is what college football is about. I mean, it's about recruiting, and if you're able to do anything you can do to get kids to go to your school, I think, coach is going to look at that and say, okay, let's do it. So, I don't know whose decision it was. I mean, I'm assuming Clark Lee was, talking with the staff saying, let's get these All Blacks, but there's going to be a lot of blue in that stadium though. So we'll see if there's going to be more blue or more black.
I think we know what is going to be more.
I think
it's
we know
definitely
too.
Going to be more blue. I mean, that's not even a question, Billy. I will be there in black, but it will be more blue.
There we go.
But it's tough because these uniforms are great. And I hope that they start some tradition of senior night every year as a blackout or something, when they can actually build up being relatively competitive. It can build up some excitement building up to that night and make it more special. Because right now, most of the time, these senior nights are tough because the season's pretty much in the can at that point for a lot of these guys, and you just don't have a great crowd, and you're usually playing an SEC opponent late in the year. So hopefully we can see this going forward. And Billy, I saw this video. Vanderbilt's these blackout uniforms are so much better than their current uniforms.
My gosh.
It is I don't even hate the current uniforms, but this made me realize how much I hate the Block V. And I can officially say without a doubt in my mind, I've watched it for a whole year and I hate it. I hate it. It doesn't look like Vanderbilt. We look like Purdue or Illinois. It's ridiculous that they've taken away the only unique thing that we had. And then you see it now in these blackout helmets, and it's like a breath of fresh air. And you see a lot of hate on social media, Billy.
I've thought about it too, and I think I'm going to agree with you. I miss – my thing was I was in the belief of, okay, whatever Clark Lee decides to do, I'm with him. Him. He's the savior.
Culture change wise, at the beginning, we were on board.
Yeah, and we both liked it, but slowly, I think I'm with you too. It took me a little bit longer, but I really don't like it either. I don't hate it. Like, I'm not.
When I saw it, I liked the promo video they released. When I saw it in person, actually out on the field, I didn't like it because it didn't look like Vanderbilt to me from the opening game. When they actually ran through there, I was like, this is really weird. And I saw the stuff on social media, Billy, and I know you saw it too, of people like, just win a game before you do stuff like this. And I'm like, okay, dude, like, what do you want a team to do? If they have a bad season, they just are like, all right, guys, no fun. We are not allowed to have an ounce of fun. You know what's going to really improve this program? If we do nothing special and we have no fun and we just walk out there and we're just straight-faced because we didn't make a bowl game. I'm like, guys, that is the dumbest thing. I don't care who you are. If you see a team release something like this, especially at the college level, like, yeah, they know they're not going to a bowl game. They know this year hasn't been successful. That doesn't mean they can't wear an alternative uniform on their senior night and have some fun with it out there. The season's not over. There's things to work on. This team is young. The staff is young. Let them build some excitement.
Let them
and
have
I'm
some
a lot
fun
more
out
positive,
there.
Billy.
Let it
loose.
loose.
Need to record more at night. I'm a lot more positive.
Will. I love positive Will. I'm gonna keep. We're back to sunshine pumping. But
here we are, something like that.
But Will, again, blackout versus Kentucky. They've got 2 weeks to get ready for it. So we'll see if there's anything up. Will Mike Wright's sleeve, and I love that celebration though. That's so awesome. But that's pretty much it. Will, you got anything else before we close this one out? We got a bye week preview coming up on Friday. It's gonna be. I wonder who we'll get on for that one. We'll see.
I think we can have a little basketball discussion during this bye week. I think it works out perfectly, Billy, that we
think
Can
it
I have a little
does.
discussion about this upcoming season that's
Coming up.
sneaking up on us?
Coming up Friday, we have a men's basketball preview. They start Tuesday against Alabama State. So that does it here for episode 121 of the Door Report, powered by Alaco Fine Wood Floors.